I will proceed with my time period here. First, let's note about Orange County. I bring people in from all over the world. I must have, in the last 10 years, brought in 20 or 30 different groups of people from foreign countries to see the operation that's going down there. And it's based on, yes, two elements. One is a new technology, with this membrane technology being developed to the utmost, but also it deals with the cooperation of various levels of government and, as you say, the sanitation department and the water district. I don't know if sanitation and water districts get along at other places, but from what I understand, sometimes it's hard for one department of government to talk to the other department of government, whether it's federal, state, or local. So, but just as they're doing that, we need to make sure that at the federal level, we are cooperating between the various departments and agencies that can have an impact on this issue. And we've already drawn attention to the fact that when you have so many people who are facing a future with billions of people without, or a billion people without clean water, that is a volatile situation where people are seeing their families die and thus undermine the security and the tranquility of whatever area that's going on. And for all we know, and I haven't looked at it yet, but I would hope to find out about it, that some of these refugees that are pouring into Europe right now and creating an enormous chaos that Europe just has not been used to, I would say that there probably is a water connection there, and several of our witnesses have alluded to that. So when our European friends talk about what can be done to help prevent that, number one, let's make sure people aren't watching their children die of some disease that wouldn't be there if they had clean water, and thus they don't feel compelled about taking their entire family and going to Europe where they think they can get clean water. Let me ask this. Has there been a assessment where we're talking about trying to have some kind of real assessment as to how effective a program is? Is this a lacking? Maybe you could go into a little more detail on that.
It's hard to do economic analysis of water projects because it's difficult to measure all these benefits. At the same time, I think we have to try. I mean, the World Bank does it, the Inter-American Development Bank does it, and I think USA can do it too. Warren Buffett doesn't get high returns on capital just by chance. I mean, he does the economic analysis to figure that out. And I think it's the same in the water sector. I mean, there are lots of good investments everywhere, but we should be focusing our taxpayer dollars on those investments with the highest economic returns. And you have to do the economic analysis to figure that out.
And one question for the panel, and just very quickly. We had the example of Singapore, where you have this huge number of people with a very limited amount of water, and now it's clean water and they're prospering. Is this an urban challenge, or are we talking about a more of a development challenge in terms of clean water? Just go down the row there.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a fair question. We've read the demographic data. 51% of the world now lives in cities, in urban and peri-urban or informal settlement environments. So I'd certainly second Dr. Whittington's suggestion to focus on cities to a certain extent. But the data also shows that 70 to 75% of the remaining problem, 70 to 75% of the 663 million people without access to safe drinking water, the 2.4 billion people without a private, safe place to go to the bathroom, are in rural communities. They are in.
Could you please repeat that statistic that you just gave us?
70 to 75% of the remaining need for safe drinking water and sanitation across the developing world is in rural communities, across Africa, across Asia, and across Latin America. Now, that is changing. People are migrating to cities and informal settlements around cities and so on. So the need is pervasive everywhere. I think what ties this all together is what I think the three of you said in your opening statements. We know how to solve this. And regardless if it's urban, peri-urban, or rural villages in Africa, Asia, or Latin America, we know how to solve these problems. They know how to solve these problems. And they need to be solved in a fashion that's both appropriate in technical terms, in financial terms, and in sociocultural terms. And these problems need to be solved in a fashion that's resilient, that's going to build systems that are able to withstand population shifts, droughts, floods, and so on. So the systems, whether it's urban, peri-urban, or rural, need to be both appropriate in a number of terms, a number of facets of appropriate and resilient.
In terms of the Orange County experience, the technology we're using is primarily applicable to urbanized areas because you need to have a central collection point for the wastewater that then you can then harvest and reuse that water and deliver it back out to your customers. So it wouldn't be so applicable in sparsely populated areas, but definitely for urbanized areas. And our type of system would go hand in hand in terms of development of a sewage collection system as well as a recycling system along with that.
So what you've got is sanitation and clean water, again.
Combined.
The importance of putting those two together.
Yes, developing those in conjunction.
So I agree with John that there are huge problems in rural areas, but I think that there's a tension between humanitarian aid and pro-growth economic aid. I'm not arguing to do less in rural areas. I just want to focus also on urban areas because that's where the economic benefits and the real chance to move economies to a high-growth dynamic trajectory is. And so as people move from rural areas into cities, there's a package of infrastructure investments that are critical to getting economic growth moving, and they include telecommunications and roads and health and education, and water is a critical component. The piped water services in urban areas are what people want. People in developing countries are just like you. They want 24/7 water that's potable that they can drink. And this is feasible, and it's not only feasible from a humanitarian point of view, it's the right thing to do from an economic development perspective.
And of course, the cleaner water in the urban area, the less money has to be spent for taking care of people's health problem. An investment in the water would negate some of that cost. Mr. Smith.